There were 2 times in my life where I was certain I was dealing with a skinwalker. Not the internet kind, not the Hollywood version. I'm talking about the real thing, the Yi Nod Lushi. The kind my grandfather warned us about when my parents weren't around. The kind that makes Navajo elders go quiet and change the subject. The first time, I was 10 years old, and it wore my dog's skin. The second time, I was in my mid-20s, and it wore the skin of a man I helped rescue from the high desert outside Cortez, Colorado. I'm going to tell you both stories, because I believe they might be connected in ways I'm only now beginning to understand. They both still keep me up at night. My name is Mason. I'm Navajo on my mother's side, and I grew up splitting time between Tulsa and Window Rock, Arizona. For 15 years, I worked as a wilderness EMT and volunteer search and rescue coordinator for San Juan County. I've seen people die in the back country, and I've found bodies that had been out there for weeks. I've dealt with hypothermia, rattlesnake bites, falls from cliff faces, and one particularly bad encounter with a mountain lion. But nothing prepared me for what I found during that search in 2006. Let me start at the beginning, with the first time. I was 10 years old the summer my grandfather told me the story. This would have been 1991 in late July, hot enough that you couldn't walk barefoot on the dirt roads around Window Rock. Kent and I were staying with our grandparents for 2 weeks while our parents took what Dad called a much-needed vacation. Kent was 8 years old then, all knobby knees and questions. He'd follow me around like a shadow, trying to do everything I did. Most of the time, it annoyed me, but at our grandparents' house, I didn't mind as much. The place felt too big at night, with more dark corners and creaky boards than I cared for. Grandfather didn't tell stories the way white people do. He'd mention things in passing, dropping pieces of information, and you'd have to pay attention or you would miss it. Most of the time he'd be doing something else, like fixing a fence or working on his truck, cleaning his rifle, and a story might just come out. That day he was skinning a rabbit he'd shot that morning. I was sitting on an overturned bucket watching him work. Kent was inside with grandmother, helping her make fry bread, or more likely, getting in her way while she fed him pieces of dough. "You know why we don't whistle at night?" Grandfather asked me. I shook my head. It was something I'd been told not to do, but no one really explained why. "Whistling calls things that listen." He made a precise cut, peeling back the hide. His hands never shook, even though he was well into his 70s. "Most of the time, nothing answers, but sometimes something does." He didn't look at me. He kept working. "My grandfather told me about a man from Chinle. This was a long time ago, before the long walk, maybe before that. This man, he wanted power, wanted to live forever and to do things normal people can't do. So he learned the dark way, killed his own brother to do it, wore his skin until it became his. After that, he could wear anything's skin. Coyote, owl, deer, even other people." I remember my mouth going dry. "Did they catch him?" "No, things like that, you don't catch them. You avoid them. You don't say their name, and you don't whistle at night. You keep your windows closed and your doors locked, and you never invite something inside." He finally looked at me. "And if you see something that doesn't move right, that doesn't sound right, even if it looks like someone you know, you run. You understand me?" "Yes, sir." "I mean it, Mason. You see your brother, your mother, your father, and something feels wrong. You run, because it's not them anymore." He went back to the rabbit. We didn't talk about it again that day, But that night, I lay awake in the small bedroom I shared with Kent, listening to every creak and groan of my grandparents' house. The window was open. It was too hot to close it, and I stared at the gap in the curtains, scared I'd see something looking back. Kent was asleep in the other bed, breathing steady. He could sleep through anything, that kid. I envied him that. And then, something scratched at the window screen. I went rigid. The scratching came again, like nails dragging across metal mesh, testing it. Then it stopped. I heard breathing on the other side of the screen, heavy and wet, like a dog had been running, but not a dog. I wanted to get up to close the window, but I didn't dare move. The breathing continued for what felt like hours, but maybe it was only a couple of minutes. Then there were footsteps, padding away through the dirt. I pulled the covers over my head and prayed. Eventually, I fell asleep. The following night, it came back. Around the same time, I'd been watching the clock. 2:47 a.m. The scratching was louder this time and more persistent. There was a smell with it now, seeping through the screen. Reminded me of roadkill long forgotten in the summer sun. Kent stirred in his bed. "Mason, what's that smell?" "Go back to sleep," I whispered. "Is there someone outside?" "Just go back to sleep." That was when the scratching stopped. But then there was a voice. "Let me in." It sounded like grandmother, but not quite. Kent sat up then. "Was that?" I flew out of bed and slammed the window shut, locking it. Whatever was outside made a sound. Not quite a laugh, but not quite a growl either. Then it moved away. In the morning, there were claw marks on the screen. Deep ones, like something had tried to tear through. The frame was bent where something had pushed against it. Grandfather saw this when he came to wake us up. He didn't say a word about it. He just got his tools and replaced the screen. That night and every night after, the windows stayed closed. He burned sage in our room, leaving a line of ash on the windowsill. A couple of nights later, we heard it walking on the roof. Heavy footsteps, too heavy for any animal that should be up there. It stopped right above our room. Kent was crying quietly in his bed, trying not to make any noise. I wanted to comfort him, but I couldn't move. I was too scared to speak. We lay there listening to it pace back and forth until sunrise. In the morning, Grandfather found tracks in the dirt around the house. He would not tell us what kind. He spent the day making protection bundles, hanging them above every door and window. Whatever it was, it didn't come back. Not to that house anyway. 3 weeks later, our dog went missing. His name was Checkers, a mutt we'd had since I was 6. He had these black and white patches and floppy ears, the kind of dog that never met a person he didn't love. Kent had picked him out for me litter at the pound. Checkers slept in my room, followed me everywhere, and would steal food right off your plate if you weren't watching. He disappeared on a Tuesday night. We had let him out to pee around 9 o'clock. Dad opened the back door and Checkers trotted out, tail wagging like it always did. We were watching TV, some sitcom my mom liked. About 10 minutes passed, then 15, and Dad went to call him back in. "Checkers, come on, boy!" Nothing. Dad grabbed a flashlight and went out to look. I could hear him calling from different parts of the yard, his voice getting more concerned every few minutes. After about 20 more minutes, he came back in. "I can't find him. He must have gotten out somehow. Think he found a gap in the fence somewhere." But I'd been playing in the backyard that afternoon. I never found a gap. We spent the next 3 hours searching the neighborhood. Mom drove slowly through the streets while Kent and I called out the windows. Dad walked with his flashlight, checking under cars and bushes. Our neighbors came out to help. Someone from 2 houses down said he'd seen Checkers around 9:15 sniffing around in garbage cans. But that was it. I didn't sleep that night. I kept going over to the window, hoping to see him sitting on the porch. Kent cried himself to sleep. I heard Mom and Dad talking quietly downstairs until nearly 2 in the morning. The next day, we made flyers. Mom drove Kent and me to Kinko's, printing out 50 copies with Checkers' picture. The one from last Christmas where he was wearing the stupid Santa hat Kent had put on him. It read, "Missing dog, family pet, reward," and we put our phone number on the bottom. We spent the afternoon putting them up, on every telephone pole, every stop sign, even the grocery store bulletin board in the vet's office. Kent would knock on doors while I stood behind him, watching him explain to each neighbor about our missing dog. His voice would crack when he described Checkers. He was trying so hard to be brave. "He's really friendly," Kent would say. "He won't bite or anything. If you see him, could you call us, please?" An old lady said she would keep an eye out. The teenagers at the corner house barely looked up from their video games. And one kind woman gave us cookies, promising to check the shed. Days passed. Every time the phone rang, I'd run for it, hoping. But it was never about Checkers. Mom kept saying he'd come back on his own. The dogs have a fantastic sense of direction. But by the 4th day, even she stopped saying that. Kent barely ate. He'd sit by the back door after school, watching and waiting. I caught him leaving bits of his sandwich on the back porch. Checkers' favorite, peanut butter and jelly. "He'll smell it," Kent said when he saw me watching. "He'll know we're waiting for him." A week went by. The flyers started to fade in the sun by then. Mom gently suggested maybe we should think about visiting the pound, see if there were any puppies that needed homes. Kent ran to his room and slammed the door. I heard him sobbing through the walls. Then there was the false hope. Someone called on day 10, saying she'd seen a black and white dog in the park. We ran there. Kent was still in his pajamas. But it was someone else's dog, a female with different markings. Kent's face when he realized. I'll never forget that. It was like something broke inside him. 12 days after Checkers disappeared, he came back. I was the one who found him. Early in the morning, with barely any light out, I'd gotten up to use the bathroom and happened to glance out the living room window. And there was Checkers, sitting on our front porch, staring at the door. I should have been happy. I should have run to let him inside. But I didn't, because something was wrong. He was sitting extremely still, like a statue. Dogs, especially ones like Checkers, don't sit that still. Checkers couldn't hold still if you paid him to. And he wasn't panting when it was already hot out. No, his mouth was closed. Dogs pant, it's what they do, but Checkers was just sitting there, watching the door. And he was so clean. A dog missing for 12 days should be dirty, matted up, maybe even skinnier. But his coat looked perfect, groomed even. He was cleaner than when he'd left. I stood at the window for a long time, at least 5 minutes, maybe more. He didn't move, didn't scratch at the door, and didn't whine. He sat there staring, occasionally tilting his head, as if curious. Then Mom came down the stairs. "Mason, what are you doing up?" "Checkers is back," I said. She rushed to the window, made a happy sound, and headed for the door. I grabbed her arm. "Wait." "What, honey? He's been gone almost 2 weeks." The dog stood up then. The way he moved was very peculiar. It's hard to explain better than that. Like the actors and puppeteers on Sesame Street trying to handle a puppet. His back legs locked, then his front legs, and he sort of levered himself upright instead of standing the way dogs stand. Mom hesitated. His head swiveled toward her, not turned, but more like a swivel, and his eyes were weird too. Dog's eyes catch the light, but Checker's eyes that morning were flat black. Mom opened the door. "Mom, don't!" But she was already reaching for him. Her hand touched his head, and that's when he moved, faster than I'd ever seen Checkers move. He snapped at her, teeth clicking together an inch from her fingers. She jerked back with a yelp. "Jesus Christ!" Dad's voice came from behind us. He was on the stairs in his boxers and a t-shirt. "Back up from the door, now!" he commanded. Mom stumbled back. The thing that looked like Checkers took a step forward, crossing the threshold into our house. Its mouth opened, wide, and I heard a sound that should have never come from a dog. It sounded like my name. Dad grabbed the bat he kept by the front door. "Get out!" he shouted at it. The Checkers thing's head tilted the other way. Its mouth closed, and for a second, it almost looked like our dog again. Then it turned and walked off the porch. It was in no hurry. It just walked slowly. I watched it stop at the edge of our yard, and it tried to stand up. And I mean stand up, like a person, on its hind legs. It got about halfway, front paws hanging down, wobbling like it was trying to remember how to balance itself. It held that position for about 3 seconds, this horrific half-standing thing, before dropping back down to all fours. Then it ran, normal dog running, clearing the neighbor's fence in one bound and disappearing between the houses. We stood there in the doorway, the three of us, not saying anything. Kent showed up a minute later, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "What's going on?" "Nothing," Dad said. His voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. "Go back to bed." "Was that Checkers?" He'd seen it. Of course he'd seen it. "No," I said. "That wasn't Checkers." Kent looked at me, then Dad and Mom, and his face crumpled. "But it looked like him." "It wasn't him," Dad said firmly. "Checkers is gone, buddy. That was something else." "What do you mean, something else?" None of us knew how to answer that. Dad called Grandfather that morning. They talked for an hour in the kitchen while Mom kept Kent and me in the living room. Kent hadn't said a word since seeing the thing that looked like Checkers. He sat on the couch instead and stared at nothing. I could hear Dad's voice getting louder and more agitated. Mom put on cartoons, but I wasn't watching it, and neither was Kent. Finally, Dad came out. "Pack a bag. We're going to stay at a hotel tonight." "Why?" Kent asked. "Just for tonight, until Grandfather gets here." We stayed at the Holiday Inn by the highway. Dad got us a room with 2 beds and a pull-out couch. We ordered pizza, but nobody ate much. Dad kept checking the locks on the door, and Mom held Kent while he cried about Checkers. I sat by the window watching the parking lot. "What was that?" I finally asked. Dad and Mom looked at each other. Then Dad said, "We don't know." But I think he did know. They just knew better than to say it out loud. Grandfather arrived the next morning. He brought some stuff with him. Herbs I didn't recognize, some small bundles wrapped in cloth, a jar of something that looked like ash mixed with dirt. We went back to the house. Dad went in first, checking every room while we waited in the car. When he gave the all clear, Grandfather got to work. He did not explain what he was doing, but he went through the house room by room, marking door frames and windowsills, burning dried plants that filled the house with thick smoke. Mom opened all the windows to air it out, but the smell lingered for days. I wondered if it was the same sage he burned at the window that night. When he was done, he sat all of us down in the living room. Kent and I were on the couch, and Mom and Dad were in the chairs. He stood in front of us. Whatever came to your door yesterday, it's gone now. It won't come back. But you need to understand something." He looked at each of us in turn. "That was not your dog. Your dog died out there somewhere, and something else is wearing its skin. Maybe it's been wearing that skin for days. Maybe it was waiting for the right time to come back. But it's not Checkers. Checkers is gone." Even Mom cried then. I felt my eyes burning, but I didn't let the tears out. Kent was staring at the floor. "There are things out there," Grandfather continued. "Old things. Things that learned dark medicine a long time ago and wear animal skins and become those animals. Some of them wear human skin too. They're drawn to weakness, grief, fear. That's when they're most dangerous." "Why did it come here?" Dad asked. "I don't know. Maybe it was just hungry. Maybe it was curious. Maybe something drew it." He paused. "But it said Mason's name. That means it was watching you and learning. If I had not come, if you had let it stay this way, it would have tried again, and eventually you would have let it in." "How do you know?" I asked. "Because that is what they do. They wait and they watch and they learn how to be what you want them to be. And then, when you're not paying attention, that's when they take you." That night, Mom and Dad sat in the kitchen, talking amongst themselves, an all too familiar sound these days. I couldn't hear everything, but I did catch pieces. "Can't be real." "Saw it. We all saw it." "Rational explanation." "Stood up. It tried to stand up like a man." "The boys are scared." "Should be scared. I'm scared." They talked until almost midnight. In the end, they decided not to talk about it anymore, to pretend it never happened, to tell people Checkers had been hit by a car if anyone asked about the flyers. We burned Checkers' collar that night in the backyard. Grandfather said that part was important, that we needed to let go completely. Kent cried. I didn't. I'd already said goodbye to the real Checkers days ago. Whatever that thing was on our porch, it wasn't my dog. For months afterward, I had nightmares. I would dream that Checkers came back again and that we let him inside, that I woke up to find him standing at the foot of my bed, eyes flat and black. In those dreams, he would open his mouth wide and say my name, Mason. Kent had nightmares too. I could tell because I heard him whimpering in his sleep and calling out. He started to sleep with the lights on, and he would start checking under his bed before getting in. Even though we were just kids, he never wanted or asked for another dog. Neither did I. The nightmares eventually did stop, or maybe they just became less frequent. I learned to live with what I'd seen, packed it away in that part of your brain where you keep things you don't want to think about. Years passed. I grew up and went to college, got my EMT certification, and started to work search and rescue. Kent got married and had kids before me, and life went on. I almost forgot about Checkers, almost convinced myself it had been some kind of rabid animal, that my 10-year-old brain had exaggerated the details. But then, about a decade and a half later, I got a call about a missing hiker in the Four Corners area, and everything I'd tried to forget came screaming back. Because when we found him, when I saw his face and looked into his eyes, I knew what he was. And I knew I'd made a terrible mistake bringing him home. The call came in at 4:47 a.m. on a Saturday in October 2006. I was already awake. I hadn't been sleeping well since my divorce. Yep, 26 years old then, and I was already divorced. My phone lit up with Tom's number. He was a San Juan County SAR coordinator, former park ranger, and the kind of guy who'd been doing this for 25 years and had seen everything. If he was calling before sunrise, somebody was in real trouble. "Hey Mason, we've got a missing hiker. Navajo male, 32 years old. Name's Joseph Binley. Went out solo hiking Thursday afternoon near the Sleeping Ute Mountain Trail System. Was supposed to check in with his wife yesterday. She called it in last night when he didn't come home." I was already pulling on my pants. Weather? A cold front moved through yesterday evening. Temps dropped to the low 30s last night. He's got gear according to his wife, but we're looking at 48 hours exposure minimum. "I'll be at the staging area in 30. "Make it 20. We're losing daylight." Well, he was going to have to settle. I made it in 25. The staging area was a dirt lot off the highway, where it curved past the New Mexico border. 5 trucks were already there. People from the sheriff's office, Mark Webb with his tracking dog, Tom's old Ford, a couple of volunteers I knew by face but not by name. Tom was spreading a topographical map across the hood of his truck when I walked up. The man looked tired. Then again, Tom always looked tired. 25 years of pulling bodies out of the wilderness will do that to you. "Mason, good. You know the Sleeping Ute trails?" "Well enough. What's our search grid?" He pointed to a section of the map marked in red. "Wife says he was planning a day hike, probably this loop here. 8 miles, moderate difficulty. Should have been back by dark Thursday. His truck's still at the trailhead, keys locked inside. We checked. No sign of forced entry, no sign of a struggle, just gone." "Has he done this trail before?" "Wife says he hikes up here once a month, knows the area. He's experienced." Tom paused and rubbed his jaw. "But here's the thing. 2 ranchers reported livestock killings in this area over the past week. 3 calves mutilated. They'd been opened up, organs taken out. Navajo Nation police sent someone out but couldn't make sense of it." That sent some chills down my spine. Predators? "That's what they're calling it officially, but the ranchers are spooked. One of them said he found tracks near the kill site and claimed they were human footprints. They went all the way up to a barbed wire fence, then disappeared. Said there was nothing but coyote prints on the other side." One of the volunteers, a woman named Sarah, came up and adjusted her radio. "We ready to head out? Every minute counts in this cold." We divided into 3 teams. I was paired with Sarah and Mark Webb. Mark and his dog would take point. Sarah and I would cover the flanks. Tom took a volunteer firefighter named Bill and headed north. The others went to cover the eastern grid. The trail began as a well-maintained path with clear markers. The morning air was crisp. There was frost still clinging to the shadowed areas. But as we climbed higher, the terrain got rougher, with loose scree, steep drop-offs, and sections where the trail narrowed to barely 2 feet wide, with nothing but air on one side. About a mile in, we found the first strange thing. It was a dead raven, perfectly intact, lying right in the middle of the trail. There were no wounds or signs of what killed it. Mark's dog, Bear, wouldn't go near it either. In fact, he stood there whining until Mark picked it up with a stick and tossed it into the brush. "That's weird," Sarah said. "Ravens don't often drop dead like that." Half a mile later, we found 3 more, all arranged in a rough line across the trail. "Poison, maybe?" Mark suggested. I wasn't sure about that. Bear had Joseph Binley's scent from a jacket his wife provided. The dog was good at his job, nose down, moving steadily up the trail. But 2 miles in, he stopped. Just stopped dead, head up, ears forward. "Bear?" Mark moved up beside him. "What is it, boy?" The dog whined. Not his normal working sound. This was high-pitched, anxious. He took 2 steps backward, away from something up the trail. "Strange," Mark said. "He's been acting weird all day. Doesn't usually spook easy. I mean it. He tracked through a mountain lion's territory last month without batting an eye." Sarah had her hand on the radio then. "Maybe he's picking up on a predator." But Bear wasn't acting like he'd scented a predator. Poor dog looked terrified. "Let me check ahead," I said, and moved up past them. The trail curved around a boulder the size of a car. I rounded it, then stopped. There was a smell, not strong but distinct, a coppery and herby smell. Something else too, reminded me of dead deer. And as I had rounded that boulder, the temperature seemed to drop. Maybe like 10 degrees colder in this one spot. But there was no shade here, no reason for that to happen. My hand moved to the knife on my belt without me even thinking. "Mason?" Sarah called. "See anything?" "Nothing," I said. Just hold on." The dirt ahead looked disturbed. Not footprints exactly, but like something had been dragged across it recently. The disturbance went off the trail and into the trees, then came back, then continued up the path. Whatever made it had been moving in circles, like it was confused, or like it was playing. "We should mark this location." Sarah came around the boulder. "Mark what? I don't see anything." I looked again. She was right. Staring back at the dirt, it was normal now, just a regular trail. The disturbance I swear that I saw was gone, but that smell and the cold spot were still there. We continued up. Bear eventually started to work again, but he stayed close to Mark, kept his tail low, looking back over his shoulder every few steps. 3 miles in, we found the first piece of evidence. A water bottle, partially buried under fallen leaves. The label matched the brand Joseph's wife said he carried. "Okay," Tom's voice crackled over the radio. "We've got scent. Tighten the search grid. He's in this area somewhere." But the water bottle bothered me. It seemed to have been placed carefully. Not dropped or discarded, but placed there, with the cap on, sitting upright under those leaves, like someone had arranged it, as if someone wanted us to find it. The next 2 miles were harder going. The trail deteriorated into barely more than a game path. We had to use our hands to scramble over rocky sections. Sarah slipped once and caught herself on a pine branch. When she pulled her hand back, there was blood on her palm. Not from thorns, but from tiny-looking cuts, like the branch had been sharp as glass. What the hell? She took a closer look at the branch. It looked fine, but when she touched it again more carefully, it cut her finger, just like that. Ow! That's not normal. All the vegetation in this area was like that. It looked normal, but it was wrong when you looked closer or touched it. When Mark tried to push through some bushes, he jerked back. His jacket had been torn in 3 places. More carefully now, we pushed deeper into the high country. I started to notice other things. The further out we got, the fewer birds sang, fewer insects made sounds, and before long, it had all died down, leaving this claustrophobic stillness that made every sound we made seem too loud. At 10:23 a.m., Mark's radio crackled. "Team 2 has contact. We found him, North Ridge near the Box Canyon. He's alive." Relief flooded through me. Alive. We'd found him alive. "Condition?" Tom asked. There was a pause. Then, "He's, walking. Looks disoriented but mobile. We're bringing him down now." We altered course to meet up with Team 2. It took 40 minutes of hard hiking through rough terrain. I was becoming more anxious by the second. This forest did not want us here. And for what reason, I did not know. When Sarah grabbed my arm suddenly, I nearly shouted. She said, "Mason, look at that." She pointed to a tree ahead of us. There were handprints on the bark about 7 feet up. Human-shaped handprints, pressed deep into the wood like the tree had been soft when they were made. But that was an old tree. Had to be 50 years old at least. Make that make sense. When we finally reached them, I saw Joseph Bentley for the first time. He was sitting on a rock, wrapped in an emergency blanket, drinking from a canteen. He was in his mid-30s, average height, black hair pulled back in a ponytail. He looked tired, but otherwise unhurt. No visible injuries, no signs of exposure. His clothes were clean. That struck me as odd. 2 days in the wilderness, and his pants looked fresh. No dirt, no tears, nothing. Dave from Team 2 was talking to him. "Just stay calm, we're going to get you checked out and get you back to your wife." "I'm fine," Joseph said. His voice was somewhat emotionless. Just got turned around, lost track of time. "You've been out here 2 nights, buddy," Dave said. "Temperature dropped below freezing, too. We've got to get you checked for hypothermia, dehydration, and—" I said I'm fine. The way he said it made something cold settle into my stomach. There was no relief in being found in his voice. No embarrassment either at needing to be rescued. Nothing that you would expect from someone who had been lost. I moved closer to him. "Joseph, I'm Mason, Wilderness EMT. I need to do a quick check if that's okay, to make sure you're good to walk down." He looked right at me. His eyes were brown, normal size, normal color, but there was something missing behind them, like looking at a photograph of a person instead of the person themselves. "Sure, whatever you need," he said. I knelt down in front of him, pulling out my pen light. "Look straight ahead, please. I'm going to check your pupils." He stared forward. I shone the light in his right eye, then his left. His pupils constricted, a normal response. But his eyes didn't water, and he didn't blink. His eyes stayed fixed on a point over my shoulder. I counted in my head, 30 seconds, 40, a full minute, and the man still didn't blink. "Joseph, you can blink." He blinked immediately, like I had reminded him that he could even do that. How long have you been without water, Joseph?" I asked. "Don't know. A day, maybe." "But you're not thirsty?" "I'm fine." I checked his pulse then. 60 beats per minute, somehow perfectly steady. Someone who had spent 2 nights in the wild would have an elevated heart rate. Stress, exhaustion, relief at being found, but his was calm, like someone just sitting on their couch. "Well, can you tell me what happened?" I asked. "How'd you get yourself lost?" "Went off trail, chasing a deer. Got confused." "You were chasing a deer?" "I wanted a photo." "For 2 days?" He blinked again, like, "Oh, let me remember to do that," kind of blink. "Lost my phone. Couldn't find the trail. Wandered." The way he spoke was so hollow, and his breath, there was something off about that too. It didn't fog in the cold air like everyone else's. I stood up. "Well, he's showing no signs of exposure. Vitals are stable. I'd like to get him down and do a more thorough check." "Sounds good," Tom said. "Let's pack up, Joseph. You feel okay to walk?" "Yes." Joseph stood up. No trouble at all, no stiffness, no soreness, just straight up. A girl named Jessica, a younger volunteer, offered him a protein bar. "You must be hungry." "No, thank you." "You haven't eaten in 2 days, right?" "I'm fine." We started the hike down then. Joseph walked in the middle of the group, flanked by Dave and Mark. I hung back with Sarah and watched. "Do you think there's something off about this?" I asked her quietly. She shrugged. "The guy got lost and got lucky. Probably scared out of his mind but trying to play it cool." But it wasn't that. I'd seen scared hikers play tough, and this wasn't that. We'd been hiking about 20 minutes when I noticed how evenly Joseph was walking. That trail, as I said before, was rough and uneven, with rocks and roots and loose dirt. Everybody was watching their footing, occasionally stumbling, experienced SAR and volunteers. But Joseph moved like he was walking on flat ground. and not once did I see him stumble. He never adjusted his stride. It was like his feet found the perfect spot every single step without him even looking down. And he wasn't sweating. We were all sweating from the pace and the gear, everyone except Joseph. "Joseph," I called, "how's your energy? You need a break?" He turned his head to look at me. Just his head, not his shoulders, and I swear it was about 10 degrees too far for a normal person to turn comfortably. "I'm fine." "Still, we should stop. Let everyone catch their breath." Tom waved us down. We gathered in a small clearing, everyone grabbing water and checking their gear. Joseph stood apart from the group. He was staring into the trees. Mark walked over to me, Bear pressing up against his leg. "The dog won't go near him," he said quietly. "Bear's been keeping maximum distance since we found him." I then moved over next to Joseph. "Your wife's gonna be so glad to see you." No response. Joseph?" He turned to face me then, rotating his whole body this time, like he'd remembered that's how people move. "Yes." "I said your wife's gonna be glad to see you." "Yes, she will be glad." Dave called out, "All right, let's keep moving. Got about 3 miles to the trailhead." We walked, but I couldn't stop watching Joseph. The more I watched, the more wrong things I noticed. Even his shadow seemed weird. Maybe I was getting paranoid and staring too long and being too judgmental. But I swear to God it seemed to lag behind him slightly, like his shadow was struggling to keep up with his form. When he stepped over a log, his shadow seemed to flow over it instead of jumping, so to speak. We were maybe a mile from the trailhead when Mark's dog started to act up again. Bear pulled hard on the leash, trying to get away from Joseph. He was whining, the fur on his back standing up. "Easy, Bear," Mark said. "What's gotten into you?" Joseph stopped walking and turned to look at the dog. Bear went silent instantly. Not calm though, but silent. His mouth was open and body tensed up, like he was still whining but without the sound. You okay, bud?" Mark said, pulling Bear closer. "He must be—" Joseph smiled. The smile didn't touch his eyes. "Dogs don't like me." "Why is that?" I asked. "They can tell." "Tell what?" "That I'm not right." The words hung in the air for a moment. Nobody spoke or replied to it. Then Joseph laughed, and it was a perfectly normal laugh, and he shook his head. "I'm joking. I got bit by a dog when I was a kid. They pick up on the fear." But he wasn't afraid. There wasn't an ounce of fear in him, and the way he suddenly talked with emotion seemed so abrupt. We kept walking. Bear stayed silent until Joseph was 30 feet ahead. Then suddenly his whining came back full force. The last half mile felt endless. The sun was high now, hot on our backs. Every time I looked at Joseph, my grandfather's words echoed in my head. "You see your brother, your mother, your father, and something feels wrong. You run, because it's not them anymore." But I couldn't run and I couldn't accuse him. Even I didn't fully believe the ideas in my head. We made it to the parking lot at 12:15 p.m. Joseph's truck was still there, keys still locked inside. Tom called his wife, letting her know we were bringing him to the medical center in Cortez for evaluation. This is standard procedure. Joseph didn't argue, and he didn't ask to go straight home. He nodded and climbed into the back of Sarah's patrol vehicle. I watched him through the window as we packed up our gear. He sat perfectly still, hands in his lap, staring straight ahead. Didn't fidget, didn't look around, but sat there. "Hell of a lucky find," Dave said, clapping me on the shoulder. "That guy could have died out there." "Yeah," I said. "Lucky." But luck had nothing to do with it. Whatever we found on that mountain, it wanted to be found. It had left that water bottle like a breadcrumb. It had waited for us, and now we were bringing it home. Sarah drove Joseph to the medical center, and I followed in my truck. The whole drive I kept thinking about calling my grandfather, but argued with myself if this really was the situation I thought it was. At the medical center, they did a full workup. I knew one of the nurses, Carla, from previous SAR operations. She was the one who took Joseph's vitals. "It's so weird," she said to me quietly while Joseph was in the bathroom. "Everything I checked was textbook the right number. Body temperature 98.6, and I checked several times with no fluctuation." She continued, "Nobody's temperature is exact. It fluctuates, and his blood pressure too. Perfect 120/8 every single time. And his heart rate is exactly 60, like someone programmed ideal vitals into a computer." The doctor, though, didn't seem at all concerned. Everything came back normal, or better than normal. Perfect even. No signs of dehydration despite 2 days without water. No hypothermia despite freezing temperatures. No elevated stress hormones. "You're very lucky," the doctor told Joseph. "Most people don't fare so well after that kind of exposure." "I'm fine," Joseph said. His wife arrived an hour later. Emily Bentley, schoolteacher, early 30s, long black hair in a braid. She rushed into the room crying and threw her arms around her husband. "Oh my God, Joseph, I was so scared. I thought—" She stopped, pulled back, and looked at his face. "Joseph?" "I'm fine," he said. You look—" She touched his cheek, and I saw her flinch slightly, like his skin was the wrong temperature, even though we had just checked. "You look different." "It's been a hard couple days." "No, you look better, younger. Did they give you something?" The doctor shook his head. "Just fluids and observation." Emily stared at her husband, confused. Their 2 kids had come in with her, a girl about 8 years old and a boy around 6. They hung back by the door, not running to their father like you'd expect. The girl, Sophie, I heard Emily call her, actually took a step backward when Joseph looked at her. "Daddy?" the boy said uncertainly. "Hello, Michael," Joseph said. The words were right, but the tone was wrong, overly formal. Emily noticed. I could see it in her face, but she pushed through it and smiled. Let's get you home. You must be exhausted." She hugged him again. This time I saw Joseph's arms come up and wrap around her, but the kids didn't hug him at all. They discharged Joseph an hour later. As they were leaving, I overheard Sophie whisper to her mother, "Why does Daddy smell different?" "Shh, honey, he's been lost in the woods for 2 days." I watched them drive away, Emily talking while Joseph stared out the window, the kids silent in the back seat. That should have been the end of it. Missing hiker found safe, everyone goes home, case closed. That night I stayed up sitting at my kitchen table with my laptop, searching for anything that might explain what I'd seen. I found Joseph's Facebook profile. His wife posted regularly. Family photos, school events, hiking trips. I scrolled back through months of posts. The Joseph in those photos was different than the person we'd found. The same face and same build, but something essential was missing from the man we'd brought down from the mountain. The Joseph in the photo smiled with his whole face, had laugh lines around his eyes, looked at his family with warmth. The thing we brought back home had none of that. Around 3 a.m., I gave up trying to rationalize it. I knew something was wrong. I thought about calling someone, Tom maybe, or my grandfather. But again, I didn't. I did nothing at all, and told myself I was being stupid. That being lost like that does different things to different people. Not everyone will handle it the same way. After all, Emily would have noticed if something was really wrong with her husband. Wouldn't have taken him home, right? I was wrong about that too. A few weeks later, I ran into Tom at the hardware store in Cortez. He was picking up fence posts. We made small talk for a few minutes about the weather and upcoming search operations. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. "Hey, you hear about the Bentley situation?" What situation?" "Well, the wife called the sheriff's office and said Joseph's been acting strange since we brought him back. Wandering around at night, standing in the kids' rooms while they sleep. She woke up at 2 a.m. last week and found him just standing at the foot of the bed, staring at her. Not moving, not blinking, just staring." "Jesus, what did the sheriff say?" Tom shrugged. "Not much they can do. Guy hadn't broken any laws. They suggested she get him to see a doctor, maybe check for a head injury we had missed. PTSD from being lost." He paused. Then he looked around to make sure no one else was listening. "Sarah did the wellness check, said Joseph seemed fine when she talked to him. Polite and cooperative, but she said something felt wrong. Said when she walked into that house it felt like walking into a meat locker. It was too cold. The heat wasn't on and the windows were all open in the middle of October. Kids were wearing winter coats inside." I wanted to tell him then, to say what I had been thinking, but the words stuck in my throat. "That's gotta be some kind of trauma," I managed. 2 days alone in the wilderness can mess with your head." "Yeah," Tom said, but he didn't sound convinced. "There's more, though. Emily told Sarah that Joseph doesn't really sleep anymore, just sits in a chair all night and faces the wall. He doesn't want to eat. She's tried everything, his favorite foods, takeout, even just soup. But he won't touch it. Says he's not hungry. It's been 2 weeks, Mason. 2 weeks without eating." Over the next few months, I heard things. Not directly, I wasn't close to the Bentley family, but through the small-town network. Stories that got stranger as time went on. Emily had taken the kids to stay with her sister in Farmington for a few weeks. When someone asked why, she said Joseph needed space to recover. But her sister, Maria, told people the real reason. The kids were terrified of their own father. Sophie had woken up one night to find Joseph standing in her doorway, smiling at her in the dark. Not a normal smile either, she claimed. When Emily asked him about it, he said he was just checking on his kids. But Sophie swore his eyes had been reflecting like a cat's eyes that night. Joseph had been fired from his job at the tribal administration office after 3 weeks. His coworker told me about it when I ran into him at the gas station. "Oh, it wasn't any one thing," Ben said. "Just everything was wrong. He'd sit at his desk for hours without moving. Not working, not looking at his computer, just sitting there perfectly still. And the way he'd watch people, like he was studying them and learning them. Janet from accounting said she caught him at her desk one morning before anyone else got in. He'd been going through her personal photos. When she asked what he was doing, he said he was practicing." Practicing what?" "Practicing being normal. That's what he said, practicing being normal." Someone saw him walking along the highway at 3 a.m. one night, miles from his house. When the deputy stopped to check on him, Joseph said he was walking home, but that was the opposite direction of his house. About 6 months after the rescue, Emily brought the kids back home. I don't know what fully convinced her to come back. I can understand it though. She thought things would be better, that everything could go back to normal. But there was no going back to normal. A year passed, then another. I stopped thinking about it, and I guess the town did too, because I stopped hearing much about Joseph and the Bentleys. Then on a Tuesday morning in November, my phone rang. It was Sarah. "Mason, you need to turn on the news." I was getting ready for work with coffee in hand. "Why? What's going on?" "Just turn it on." Her voice was shaking. I grabbed the remote. The local news was showing footage of a house fire, smoke billowing into the early morning sky, all black and thick. The banner at the bottom read, "Breaking, multiple fatalities in Cortez house fire." Then they showed the address. It was Joseph Binley's house. "Jesus Christ," I whispered.
"They're saying 3 dead. Emily and both the kids,"
Sarah said.
"And it wasn't from the fire. They had single gunshot wounds to the head while they were sleeping. Then someone set the house on fire."
"Joseph?"
"He's gone. They found his truck in the driveway, but no sign of him. They've got dogs out looking, helicopters too, nothing yet."
The details came out over the next few days. The neighbors had heard nothing. No gunshots, no screams. The family had been dead for hours before the fire started. The search for Joseph went on for weeks. They brought in teams from 3 counties. They found human footprints, but they were barefoot and seemed to vanish right into nothing. Through the grapevine, I heard they found strips of what looked like human skin dangling from tree branches. But they never found Joseph. The investigation officially concluded that Joseph had suffered a psychotic break, killed his family, and fled into the wilderness. They assumed he was dead somewhere out there. Exposure, they said. Animals. The case went cold. I ended up moving to Albuquerque. I didn't feel like staying in that town anymore. But a while later, I got a call from Tom.
"They found something,"
he said. "Tom, I really don't."
"Just listen. They were doing a training exercise up near Sleeping Ute. New SAR volunteers teaching them grid search patterns. That same area where we found Joseph a few years ago."
My stomach was starting to knot up.
"They found some human remains scattered over about 30 yards. Mostly bones, some clothing fragments, pretty heavily scavenged by animals."
He paused.
"They ran DNA. Mason, it was Joseph Binley."
"That's impossible. Joseph killed his family about 6 months ago. If he died out there..."
"No,"
Tom interrupted.
"You're not quite getting me. The ME looked at the remains, based on decomposition, weathering, insect activity, plant growth through the bones. He's estimating time of death at approximately 2.5 years ago."
I felt dizzy. "What?"
2.5 years, Mason. That places the age around when Joseph first went missing. Before we found him. Before we brought him back."
I couldn't speak.
"They found his driver's license, his wedding ring. Everything checks out. If these remains are from 2.5 years ago, if Joseph Binley died up there when he first went missing, then what the hell did we bring back from that mountain? What lived in that house for 2 years? What killed Emily and those kids?